We're sawing bones and de-oiling snakes in a show all about quackery. Joining me on Queasy Street are the miraculous and rejuvenating Claudia Winkleman. Guaranteed to take years off your life, it's Victoria Coren Mitchell. Good for anything that ails you, it's Stephen K. Amos. Alan Davis. And their buzzers don't sound well at all. Claudia goes...
Achoo!
Wow. Victoria goes...
Oh! Literally dying.
Stephen goes...
My dad's car.
And Alan goes... Anybody else feel the need for a mop? I've given you all some quack medicines. I would like you to persuade me to buy them. So we're going to start with Stephen. Oh. What is your quack medicine?
It's a jar of Princess Lotus Blossom's Vital Spark.
Marvellous. And what do you suppose it does?
The lotus blossoms, of course, one of the most famous flowering flowers.
I love a flowering flower.
From Japan.
Yes.
Obviously, it gives you vital sparks, energy.
Right.
Basically, a modern-day superhero supplement.
Right.
Yeah, there is a wave of superhero films at the moment. We should all embrace those.
Right.
One of the biggest ones for me last year was, of course, Black Panther. The Black Panther gets his superpowers by consuming a special herb.
OK.
You want to just go the whole hog and just call him Ganja Man.
These were actually sold at the World Fair in 1904 by somebody pretending to be Princess Lotus Blossom, and she was trying to give men a vital spark. What might be the idea behind the pill that men might want?
Like a prompt to action.
Yes, exactly that. She was actually a woman called Violet McNeil. She was from the Midwest, and she had nothing to do with being a princess, but she claimed to be Chinese. And does anybody know why she could claim to be Chinese and nobody would know? She's put on a bit of what they used to call yellow face. I know. That's what it was called. It was called yellow face. It was because the Americans had banned all Chinese people in 1882, so people didn't know what a Chinese person looked like.
They just banned them?
They just banned them. The Chinese Exclusion Act. It's a pretty clear name for an act, isn't it? We just got rid of them.
On what grounds?
Well, that there were too many of them working, and what they wanted to do was to have jobs for you know, Americans. They were not Chinese. And so they got rid of them. In fact, they got rid of them until 1943, when they allowed in 105.
That's extraordinary. So they didn't know she was Chinese?
No, so they didn't know she wasn't Chinese. She was this woman from the Midwest.
Hell, that's Violet. She ain't Chinese. That's Violet? Violet! What are you doing?
They're basically boiled sweets, but she told everybody that this was something that had come from a pouch in the turtle brain called the quackery.
Violet, where'd you get them pills?
There it is, the quackery. And she would say, a man who takes these pills will shout out, "Pongwuki," which is, she claimed, Chinese for eureka.
So these from that era, if I take a couple, will the desk rise?
You might just come through it like that. Tunneling thing, you know, in Thunderbirds.
I suddenly really want them to work. Right, let's try another one. Alan, you've got some medicine. What have you got?
Oh, well, it's Dr. Brinkley's Formula 1020.
And what do you think's in it?
I think something drawn from an animal of some sort, of bodily fluid, and then you add it to your own self. Cheaply priced and almost odourless. I'm describing myself there.
It was a distillation of goat glands.
Oh, for God's sake.
What? Yeah. Well, it wasn't actually. It was just coloured water.
The temptation to fire it at the audience is almost...
I'm glad I was looking at you. I would have thought it was Stephen. He promoted this as a distillation that would cure anything from emphysema to flatulence.
What?
Which is quite a range, isn't it, of diseases.
So I was quite close. Cure anything, a cure-all.
Yes, but he also looked part goat, I think.
Yes, goatee.
Yes, exactly. And goats were a big thing for him because after the coloured water, he thought something more significant is needed. And he started transplanting goats' testicles into men's scrotums.
I said, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You can't put a goat's testicle into a man's scrotum.
Well, as they discovered.
And God knows I've tried. But there's no...
He was the goat gland doctor, and you would select your goat, and the goat would then be castrated and the testicles inserted into the patient's scrotum.
But no, that didn't happen.
No, it did happen, and lots of people did it without checking whether he was medically qualified to do this.
Were these people, were they maybe impotent and concerned whether they could or could not have kids?
Aha!
Baby goats.
Yeah. It's better when you explain it. He went to something called Eclectical Medical College in Kansas, but he didn't actually graduate. And anyway, the college was one of homeopathy. But he became unbelievably famous as the goat gland doctor. He started his own radio station in Kansas. He became so popular that he paid for the town that he lived in to have a second post office to receive all the letters that he got. He did kill hundreds of people. And in the end, in 1939, he sued the American Medical Association. Somebody had dared to say he was a fraud, and he sued them for libel. And then when he gave evidence, it was quite clear that he was a fraud, and he was stripped of his licence. He died in poverty. Don't feel bad for him. Big fan of Hitler.
Right.
Yeah. Had a swimming pool decorated with miniature swastikas. You know, they
Wow.
kind of guy. Yeah, so...
Wouldn't they castrate and sheep and goats?
Yeah.
Then the testicles just drop off and shrivel up in the sack, don't they?
Actually, that's not true, because I have held a pair of ram's testicles. And...
Ram's testicles?
Yeah, they weren't attached to the ram at the time. I was making a series about the dictionary, and we were investigating the origins of the word codswallop.
Yep.
Because nobody quite knows where it comes from, and one theory was that it's related to cods, which is slang for testicles, and... you know, television being what it is, apparently I had to explain this on camera while holding a pair of ram's testicles.
So, as in cod piece?
Yeah, cods, knackers, it's a sort of common slang.
No.
Yes, and we went to a butcher's shop.
This is good.
And no, but they're enormous.
Describe like that.
I mean...
Can I just say this is not the direction I thought this was going to go? So here's the thing, lots and lots of cures for virility, and I'm just going to pass this on as a piece of general knowledge. If you put Viagra in a vase of flowers, the flowers will stay erect for a week longer than normal. Right, Claudia, your medicine,
Yes?
what are you going to sell to us? Let's come
OK.
away, shall we, from virility.
Oh, this is excellent. Theodore Roosevelt's baldness salve.
Ah.
Yeah. It might not be your hair, it's just an area of your body where you want some more hair. Forearms, legs, hot, cool. Check me out.
Yeah.
You use this.
Right.
I use this. Yeah, before this, I didn't have hair and down. Yeah.
Well, it was sold by something called the Skolder Institute, and it was sold as something that had been used by both Roosevelt and Houdini. As it happens, both of them had recently died just before this product came out, so they couldn't say whether it was true or not. You sent samples of your hair through the post for an individual diagnosis by Professor Skolder, and he got his diagnosis from a Dominican friar. It was rather a complicated process, but a guy called Arthur J. Cramp, who was a rather tenacious member of the American Medical Association, he sent in hairs from a fox fur coat, from a Japanese wolf dog, then a woman with extremely long, lustrous hair, and finally a piece of wrapping twine. And each time he got the same response, which was that the hair was severely undernourished and needed Dr. Skolder's cure. It's actually just Vaseline.
Yeah, but good.
Good.
But I think I did. I mean, we all want some, right?
Yes, you've sold that to us.
People have asked me whether I have experienced hair loss due to the fact that I'm wearing what is called a do-rag. I thought I'd wear it tonight
Right.
to bring attention to the great British public that that is what this is.
OK.
It's not a hat, it's not a hairnet, it's a do-rag. I get confused. People at the airport, immigration, excuse me, sir, can you take off your bonnet? And I get quite defensive. I say it's actually a do-rag.
I
And
know.
It is a hat.
Yeah.
I mean, not to get too existential, but...
Please do.
What is a hat?
Oh, where do we draw the line? A plastic bag?
If you put it on your head, it's a hat.
Right, Victoria,
Oh.
a cure, please.
Yes, OK, I have...
Oh, Tupperware.
Do Nothing Mitchell's Rest Cure. My
Yeah.
guess is going to be that it's just fresh air in some...
Well, it used to be known as Dr. Diet and Dr. Quiet. And actually, this guy, that's him there holding a clinic, Dr. Silas Mitchell. He's not really a quack, but sometimes good doctors come up with kind of quacky ideas.
Look at the do-rags on them three.
Said no one ever.
But what era is that?
Turn of the 20th century.
Because until the turn of the 20th century, I think the distinction between doctors and quacks was quite moot.
Oh, yeah, but this guy he's the father of neurology. But he also came up with this idea, women in particular, that it was incredibly good for them to lie down, do absolutely nothing for 6 weeks. And they were not allowed to do anything except be spoon-fed, maybe get up and go to the loo. They had to drink pint after pint of milk, and they were banned from reading and writing. So Virginia Woolf did the cure. Her doctor described it when she'd had a nervous breakdown. She writes about it in Mrs. Dalloway. Charlotte Gilman wrote The Yellow Wallpaper, which is a book about a woman going mad because of this rest cure, but it was particularly given to women, and it was thought that this would cure them of... I don't know, the hysterical idea that they wanted to work.
Or read a book.
Or read a book.
Think of all the laundry that's mounted up after 6 weeks.
But he was also a good doctor. He coined the term phantom limb syndrome. He, in fact, was the first reported case of something called Mitchell's disease.
We've all been there.
I don't know where we get the word quack from.
Ducks.
Extra point for Alan there. I think that's marvellous.
Something's going to go off.
It's quack salve. It's somebody just bragging about their ointment. There's a fantastic golden age in the United States of quackery. It's pretty much post-Andrew Jackson. He was the 7th president, and he generally believed that the common man knew more than experts. So he was the Michael Gove of his day, if you like. All but 3 states repealed all their laws regarding medicine, so people were free to just go and sell whatever they like in medicine shows. I mean, Europe had them as well. We had what we called mountebanks, who used to go and sell medicines, literally climbing up onto a bench. It's Italian for mounting a bench. Right, this next question makes me all of a quiver. Why might you invest in a vibratory chair? Oh! Perfect noise for it.
Because you're furnishing your vibratory?
Oh! I want a vibratory.
Yeah. It's a new room in sexy Cluedo. Go there, you get beaten to death by an Art Deco vibrator.
It's a good place to go if you're mixing something in a bowl.
Well, there is an entire museum in the United States called the Museum of Questionable Medical Devices. It's in a science museum in Minnesota. It was called the Battle Creek Vibratory Chair. It's from 1900. There it is there. It shook the patient violently to help waste pass through the intestines. It also cured headaches, apparently. It was installed in John Harvey Kellogg's sanatorium in Battle Creek. Kellogg, famous for...
Cornflakes.
Cornflakes, absolutely. He was an odd fellow. He believed that all sex was bad. I mean,
All
everything.
sex?
All sex, yeah. He was married for a long time, but it said it was never consummated.
They produce huge quantities of semen.
Oh, look at that now. I just shook this in my chair.
Joking aside, vibrators were used as medical equipment.
Yes.
I think in the 20s, to temper the hysteria of women when they go getting ideas, you calm them down with a vibrator. And, you know, some doctors, I think, had queues around the block. But that's again, the border, isn't it, between quackery and medicine, because it's sort of a nonsense in a way, and yet...
Well worth doing the research.
I'm not sure that isn't an urban myth. You think it is true, though?
Yes, I've been to a vibrator museum.
Where is there a vibrator museum?
In Holland. I mean, genuinely, a woman would go and see the doctor and the doctor would perform the exercise for her. And, you know, nobody ever came out feeling worse.
You feeling better yet?
There's also, in this museum of questionable medical devices, there's a 1970s foot-operated breast-enlarging pump. It looks completely... There it is. Yeah.
Oh, is that so you can be discreet under the desk?
Do you mean to pump milk out?
No. The idea was it would make your breasts larger if you pumped at them. I think one of the most horrible ads I've ever seen for a dubious medical device is for Dr. Scott's electric hairbrush, sold in the 1890s. Look at this. Dr. Scott's electric hairbrush will not save an Indian's scalp from his enemies, but it will preserve yours from dandruff, baldness, falling hair. What I like is at the very bottom it just says, valuable book, free. It came with a compass. And the compass...
A compass?
Yes, if you passed it over the brush, it jumped, and it's supposed to show that the brush was properly working. I mean, obviously, it just showed it had magnetised iron in it. And then there was a guy who was I think he was the kind of dean of gadget quacks, Albert Abrams. He invented lots of things, but one of the things he invented was the dynamizer. And he claimed he could diagnose any known disease with a single drop of a patient's blood, or their handwriting, or do it over the phone. A blood sample was sent to him by a member of the American Medical Association and got back a diagnosis that the patient had malaria, diabetes, cancer and syphilis. In fact, the blood had come from a rooster. Now to a different kind of quack. What am I saying here?
Oh, adorable. I mean, it's time for tea. Get all your mallard friends. I've laid out the area.
But do not bring bread.
Yes, no, bread is very bad for ducks. That's a very good point. But you mentioned mallards. Most ducks don't quack. But it is predominantly female mallards who make this particular noise. And why do you think they make it?
Is it a duck rape alarm? Because isn't that a famous thing? Consent is not big in the duck world.
No, not at all. They're nasty to each other sometimes. Yeah.
Yes, and I think the mating thing is pretty horrible. Hashtag quack quack.
They mate for life, and they're in love. I believe that. I saw it on a Valentine's card.
That's swans.
Yeah.
Yes, the sex act is a forced one for ducks.
Yeah, and they chase them down, and then they keep their face out the water by holding their neck up with a beak.
Very unpleasant.
And then they impose themselves upon the female. In the middle of Hampstead Heath.
It's not right. So the females give these bouts of loud, monotonous quacks, particularly during their pre-laying period. Why might they do that?
But is it because they're fertile?
It is because they're fertile, but it isn't what you might think, which is that they're looking for a mate, because they quite often will do it when the mate is right there. Weirdly, we now think it's because they're drawing the attention of any predatory mammals who might be in the area. So what they want to do is, if the predators come, they think, not going to stay here and nest, it's not safe. And so they're actually trying to attract the very thing that might have a go at them.
Gosh, that's clever, isn't
It is clever,
Yes,
isn't
yes,
it?
yes. Like leaving your car doors unlocked if you go to look round a house.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah.
Exactly.
OK, I haven't thought of doing that, but that's very clever. The other possibility, of course, is that there's already a pair of ducks there and they're sending out a message saying, we've moved in, don't any other ducks come, because this is our place, so go away. But now, let's all have a go. You've all got a duck caller. There is a human sport of duck calling, so trying to get the waterfowl to come in order to be shot, and the best duck callers take part in a World Championship duck calling contest, which is in Arkansas in every Thanksgiving.
Well, why don't we all go?
I don't know.
Why aren't we there?
I know. Let's see if we're good enough. Only one woman has ever won. Rather pleasingly, she won in 1955 and 56. She was called Pat Peacock.
Brilliant.
The very first person who won didn't have a duck caller at all, just made the sound with their own throat. Victorian children used to make their bird callers by cutting the larynx from a recently dead goose. Yeah, and blowing through it.
Oh, thank God television was invented.
I know.
Look at what they used to do if a child had no legs. You just had to muck in.
Anyway, in 1850, there was a 12-year-old who accidentally swallowed his goose's larynx that he was blowing through, and he started honking like a goose every time he breathed. And there was a German doctor who eventually performed a tracheotomy on him, and there's a medical paper entitled "On the Removal of a Larynx of a Goose from That of a Child." Mallards quack to check for predators and avoid becoming a sitting duck. But what would you have to do to find yourself imprisoned in Reading for 2 years?
Oh, a sort of BA in town planning or something like that.
I've actually done shows in Reading, and for a laugh, I would just go, "Good evening, it's great to be here in Reading." And I heard this woman say, "Oh, he's trying to say Reading." Well, you know, you're here for a comedy show. I thought I was going to be imprisoned because I couldn't pronounce Reading correctly.
I was on a bus not very long ago, and I was going past a pub, and there was a sign outside. I thought it said reading versus, and I couldn't read the bottom bit because there was somebody standing in the way, and I thought, reading versus...
Colouring in.
Colouring in, or
Singing?
Yes. Anyway, it turned out to be football, and it was Reading versus... Who would Reading play, darling?
Another team.
Pretty much the amount of interest I paid to it. Yeah. So come on, what would you have to do?
Oscar Wilde, Reading Jail.
It is not connected to Oscar Wilde. There's a special quarantine centre there.
Is there?
In Reading.
Nits.
Yeah. No. There is the International Cocoa Quarantine Centre.
Stop.
In Reading, part of the University of Reading. There are lots of terrible diseases that chocolate can get. Frosty pod, witch's broom.
I knew they did silly courses in Reading, I knew.
Well, but these are really serious, Alan, because they can destroy up to 40% of the crop every year. And so when cocoa plants are transported from one country to another, it's very important to make sure that the diseases are not moved with them. And so chocolate plants will spend 2 years in Reading being cloned.
Relaxing.
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 Being cloned,
Hanging out.
tested, hanging out. If they're healthy after 2 years, then they can go on to their destination. But otherwise, they are kept in quarantine. But do you know why it's in Britain?
Is there some kind of per capita thing where we're the biggest chocolate consumers?
No, it's really simple. The weather's so bad that the diseases wouldn't possibly survive out.
It's one of the major perks of living here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
OK, why might you quarantine 5 million people?
Wales.
5 million people, largest quarantine in history. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to tell you 1918.
Was it the flu?
Yes, flu epidemic. The whole of Australia was quarantined in 1918. The flu epidemic, pandemic, started in the USA and in Europe, and the Australian government decided to quarantine the entire country. All ships were intercepted, all forced to moor offshore and see if any symptoms developed. The flu did eventually get through, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as it could have been. I mean, still very bad. 40% of the country got flu, 15,000 people died. However, if you put that against the rest of the world, 50 to 100 million people died of the flu, and there were 500 million cases. And tragically, the celebrations at the end of the First World War helped to spread it, because people who'd been keeping in their houses suddenly came out to celebrate, and then the flu was passed from one person to another. Anybody know why it was called the Spanish flu? It started in the United States and probably in France as well. It's one of those weird things where the Census didn't want anybody to write about the fact that there was a flu epidemic because they thought it would cause panic. But you could write about it being in Spain, because Spain was neutral and not part of the war. So we just blamed the Spanish. Not only not fighting, but now they've given us flu, the swines.
That's a really good fact.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I like that.
Here's the thing about Australia. They even quarantine rocks. Did you know this? I love this
Stop.
fact. Yeah, they're called sorry rocks.
Oh.
So, lumps of Uluru or Ayers rock is sometimes taken by tourists. and then they feel really guilty about it, and they post them back to the park rangers.
No.
Yeah, they get about one a day.
Stop.
The largest ever returned weighed 32 kilos. Somebody has taken a 32-kilo
But also, don't you find when you're on holiday you buy stuff that's inappropriate?
Yeah.
You go, oh, a Stetson. I'm going to live in a Stetson.
Yeah.
Because I'm in Texas. And then
Yeah.
you go home and you go, why?
Yeah. But the worry is that there's a small threat of pathogens being introduced through the rocks, and so they actually put the rocks in a neutral area. Would you like to meet Vomiting Larry?
No.
Yes.
What? Have you got a thing about vomit?
I've just closed my eyes. You continue.
No, we're not actually going to show vomit. We're just going to talk about it a lot.
Oh, I thought somebody called Larry was just going to come.
It's going to be a volcano or some kind of weird
course.
beetle or something.
It's not a volcano. It is a humanoid simulated vomiting system developed by UK's Health and Safety Laboratory in Derbyshire by researcher Dr. Kat Mackerson Booth. And there is Kat, and there is Vomiting Larry, right
Hello.
there.
Sorry.
Kat, I believe that Larry can vomit on command.
He can.
Why would you invent such a thing?
So we're looking at infection transmission, so we want to identify how far vomit spreads so that we can help clear it all back up again and prevent transmission of fluid. I kind of wish he was full there now so we could get Alan back for earlier.
Yes, shooting it with goat gland. Presumably, I'm going to guess it's further than we think the little pool of vomit.
Yeah, it'd kind of fill with all the droplets and splash most of this bit of the studio.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be able to see it, so when you come to clean up the main bulk, you'd stand in it, spread it everywhere.
So you're just carrying on, but even when you think you've cleaned it all up?
Yeah.
Why is he called Larry?
Because the head of the system's called Airway Larry. So it's for when medical students are practising laryngoscopies.
Yeah,
So I think
obviously.
that's where the Larry
I'm thinking about, do the medical students not provide enough vomit? I mean...
But they can't do it on command, so,
Yeah.
you know.
It needs to be 1, 2, 3, go.
Yeah.
Like that. OK, so now, we can't have Larry actually vomit, you'll be very pleased to know. However...
Come on, Lawrence.
We do have a film of Larry. We're going to have the film without sound, but if any of you lovely people would like to join in and create the sounds that you imagine Larry might make, then help yourselves. Here.
Why, of course.
Yeah, let's have it.
You only had to ask one.
Here we go.
I'm dying. It's coming out of my arse as well. You know when you're being... and you can't turn around quick enough because you know it's going to... Oh, no. Oh, God. Flush me.
Yes, I'm so sorry, darling. The norovirus, presumably, one of the things that you've been looking at, is that right?
Yeah, that's the key thing we're looking at. So it's really infectious, can be infected with 10 viruses, and you can have kind of 1,000 million in a litre of fluid, so highly transmissible.
It's like the Ferrari of the virus world, isn't
Definitely.
it? This is actually the norovirus here, isn't it? I mean, it looks like
yeah.
candied popcorn, but it's actually the norovirus.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for bringing Larry in. Dr. Kat Mackerson Booth. Here's the thing. They found the world's oldest vomit. They found it in Peterborough.
From the back of the Weatherspoon.
Yes. Can I guess how old it is? The oldest...
4,000 years.
A little bit older than that.
Is it a fossil?
It is a fossil, yeah.
Millions of
160
years.
million years, and it was this creature here, an ichthyosaur, so that's an ancient marine reptile. And this is where vomit becomes exciting. This is where it is actually scientifically very exciting.
Best sentence I've ever heard.
I know. We now know that ichthyosaurs behaved much as sperm whales do today. They would eat shellfish whole, and then they would vomit up the indigestible shells because that would otherwise rip their intestines. So we've learnt a huge amount just from that. It's a funny thing, vomit. There's an extraordinary story. Remember Ted Hughes, the poet? There's a story. There's a woman who met him, found him so physically attractive at a party that she had to leave and vomit.
No.
Is that one of his stories?
Yeah.
She was quite overcome by my attractiveness. She went up there and threw up. Ted, come here.
I had went to a really good party,
Yeah.
and on my way home, I was on the tube, and it was on the, you know, those old litter boxes?
Yeah.
And I had one of those, like...
Oh.
I thought, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming. Pooh! And everything came out, but there was no bottom on the bin. Filled my shoes.
I love the things the scientists discover. Apparently, they only discover that flu can travel between different species after a ferret sneezed in a scientist's face. 1933. Now, here's another question to make you queasy. What happened when Michelangelo took his socks off?
Oh, don't say some of his foot came away.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Oh.
Apparently he didn't wash, but his skin used to come off if he took his clothes off. So this is thought to be a portrait of him by Raphael. It's a sort of having a go at him. Raphael was a kind of a young buck, and Michelangelo was quite old by then. And he has Michelangelo playing Heraclitus, sort of the weeping, grumpy philosopher, because Michelangelo was incredibly grumpy. But according to Michelangelo's biographer, he wore stockings of dog skin constantly for months together, so that when he took them off, the skin of the leg often came away with them. I know.
He was very busy.
I mean, he was incredibly busy.
How long did the Sistine ceiling take?
Well, it took years and years and years, and he wrote that he constantly had his beard to heaven. He used to talk about the brush is always above my face, my haunches are grinding into my gut, and my poor ass strains to work as a counterweight. Actually, there's a really fascinating thing about Michelangelo that they've fairly recently discovered, that you can probably tell a Michelangelo sculpture. So if you take something like the Rothschild bronzes, there are 3 ways, in fact, the experts now say you can find that it's a Michelangelo. The first thing is that the first and second toes are splayed in the figure. He always depicts the abdomen as not having a 6-pack, but an 8-pack. And he gives his sculptures unruly pubic hair. And the suggestion is that one of his favourite models must have had all of those attributes, the toes and the 8-pack and the unruly pubic hair.
I wouldn't say that's unruly.
Well, it's not had a comb, has it? I like that that's now what we're all looking at.
It was what we were all looking at anyway.
What, the milk tray man's let himself go.
Michelangelo used to get his marble from the Carrara quarries in Tuscany. He used to visit the quarry and pick the exact piece of marble that he wanted.
And David that was discarded. Nobody wanted...
That's absolutely right. In fact, you should have an extra point for that, because it had been discarded by 2 previous artists.
Yes.
Agostino de Duccio and Antonio Rossellino, they both had tried, and the trouble with it is that it's not actually very good marble. And one of the reasons why we know this, there was a guy who was smashed a bit of David's toe off, and they've now been able to analyse the splinters from that. It was a guy called Piero Canata. But you're absolutely right. The David is unfortunately made of not such good stuff. Now, Alan, why might I siphon 4 gallons of gas up your bottom?
How did you get a photograph of that, you swine?
I'm talking about hydrogen.
Is it going to have an enema effect? Is it a colon cleanser?
It is a medical thing.
Is it flammable?
It is exactly flammable, and that is why it matters, yeah. This is not exactly...
Wow. Oh, like, you're actually going to do it?
Yeah. There was an American military surgeon who was called Nicholas Sen, and he came up with a system for checking whether you'd been shot in the guts. So one of the things they would do is they would pump hydrogen up your backside and then set fire to the gas as it escaped from the wound in your stomach. So we're talking about the late 19th century. It was a huge problem for surgeons to work out whether a wounded patient had their intestinal canal pierced by a bullet.
Can't you just put them underwater like an inner tube?
If you did the surgery and it wasn't necessary, it could kill somebody. So they needed to work it out. And so he came up with this system. It was called rectal insufflation of hydrogen gas. It's a bit like a plumber looking for a leak in a gas pipe. If it had gone in, it would escape through the hole. And he did try it.
If there was no hole, they would just explode.
Yes. Well, he did try it on several dogs first, to the point where their intestines ruptured. So, I know. But then he decided to try it on himself, and he had his assistant pump 6 litres of gas up his bottom. Can I just read this, because it's awful? He found that the escape of air or gas from the rectum was prevented by an assistant pressing the margins of the anus firmly above the rectal tube. Tried it on 2 patients, it never really caught on. It's
quite clear that the entire thing was devised because he fancied his assistant.
Also, sometimes I think with these stories about research, I just get to the end of a long day. And I think, let's see what happens if you stick a load of hydrogen up your arm.
But there are lots of self-experimenters. There was a guy called Dr. Stubbins Firth, and he was fascinated by how yellow fever was transmitted. But, I mean, slightly bonkers. He wanted to prove it wasn't contagious. So he did things like he dribbled infected patients' vomit into a cut on himself. He put it into his own eyes. He tried frying the vomit from a yellow fever patient and inhaling the fumes. And then he also sat in a vomit sauna. Who knew there was such a thing?
Wow.
It's another word for a night bus.
He didn't catch it, because you can only get it, of course, if it goes straight into the bloodstream, like by a mosquito, which wasn't discovered until 6 decades after he died. He died when he was 36. It doesn't say of what.
Take your pick.
Yeah. And in 2004, there was a biologist called David Pritchard. He allowed 50 hookworm larvae to burrow into his skin, and he wanted to see if the infestation could fight hay fever and asthma. So he applied a dressing. I know, it's horrible. A dressing with pin-size hookworm larvae. They're like sort of maggots on the surface of meat. And he said the itch when they cross through your skin is indescribable. But here is the thing, it worked. That for some reason, the worms somehow seemed to switch off the immune system.
Oh, yeah, OK, so he didn't have hay fever, but he had worms inside his arm. That's not better. I had pins and needles. I shot my foot off, so that worked.
Some people go a little bit too far, I think that's enough from the annals of medical history. Time to move on to that sick puppy that is general ignorance. So tell me, what's the technical name of the first patient in a disease outbreak?
Keith. Oh, the audience will know. What is it?
See, you fell into that trap immediately. No, it's the index case or index patient. People do think that it's patient 0, and actually it's based on a mistake. So the very first time that was given was to a man called Dubious, and he was a French-Canadian flight attendant who allegedly contracted HIV in Haiti, and he spread it, allegedly, to lots of men during his lifetime. And he wasn't referred to as patient 0, he was patient O, and the O stood for outside California. But people now think that it was patient 0. While we're on the origins of disease, can you name someone who had Lou Gehrig's disease?
Lou Gehrig.
No, it turns out he may not have had it.
He was a baseball player, wasn't he?
He was a New York Yankees baseball player. He died in 1941, and even though it's named after him, the chances are he didn't have it. It's most likely that he had some kind of brain trauma brought on by the long-term effects.
Very, very tight cap.
Of concussion. So Lou Gehrig's disease is actually motor neurons disease. It's also known as ALS. It's a specific disease which causes the death of neurons controlling voluntary muscles. It became famous actually with the Ice Bucket Challenge. Yeah. They raised £90 million in just 1 month with the Ice Bucket Challenge. Which is cleaner, the gents or the ladies? Yeah.
I mean, I haven't used that enough.
No.
We all agree.
Yeah, that's a very good noise, isn't it? So there was a study at the University of Arizona, and apparently ladies' loos are germier. Why might that be, do you think?
Because we chat in there for quite a long time.
We spend longer in there, but also we take children in.
Oh.
You know, crazy germ carriers.
How are those two floating through the doors?
That is slightly disturbing, isn't it? Women wash their hands a lot more than men. Men less likely to wash their hands at sporting venues. They had a study at Turner Field Baseball Stadium in Atlanta. Men wash their hands just 65% of the time when they're at a sporting venue. I don't know how this works. It says here the study involved researchers discreetly observing.
I would say it's considerably less than 65% of men.
Oh, would you say?
Wash their hands after they've had a wee at the Arsenal. I think there's about 5 of us who use those things. In fact, at the old Wembley Stadium, you go to wash your hands and then usually be about 6 blokes pissing in the sink.
Either of you ladies think that it's worth putting down toilet paper on the seat?
No.
No, why?
No, because you slide off, don't you?
I don't have the time.
Yeah.
Can't go I'll be out in a minute.
Yeah.
Have fun with my friends. Don't worry, we'll see the fireworks another time.
Every time I've ever used a public loo, I've always stood there going, what are they doing in there?
That's that.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's
Sort of
that.
crocheting their own seats.
No, but here's the good news. It's a complete waste of time. The toilet seat is designed to not keep bacteria on it, whereas toilet paper, unbelievably absorbent. The squatting?
Well, I'm more inclined to hover myself.
Yeah, so, hovering. Also a bad idea. Well, the pelvic floor muscles can't relax, and so your bladder doesn't fully empty.
It's also a waste of a superpower.
Apparently the only way you can get really, really sick in a public lavatory is licking the toilet seat.
Oh.
I'm just saying, that's what they've discovered.
Warm in there.
It turns out that the gentlemen's labs are cleaner than the ladies', despite the smell. After you've been drawn, hanged and quartered, how many parts do you end up in?
Quartered would suggest, what is it?
Is it 4?
5.
It is 5. Why is it 5?
Do they put your head somewhere else?
Head, yeah, absolutely. So it's your head plus the 4 quarters of your body. What used to happen sometimes is that the various body parts could be spread all over the country. So William Wallace, after his execution, his 4 quarters were sent to Newcastle, Berwick, Perth and Stirling, but his head remained on London Bridge. And there used to be a thing called the Keeper of the Heads. So about 300 years, the London Bridge Gatehouse was home to the Keeper of the Heads, and his job was to display the traitors' heads to good effect, take down the old ones. You know, you're getting that, oh, that one's looking a bit tired, take that one down.
A bit maggoty.
But also, some of them were higher than others. If you had died as a rather senior nobleman, your head on a pole would go higher.
Quite right, that's quite right.
Yes, quite
As
right,
it should
the
be.
junior one.
I hope you're going to put that at a very high...
Everybody worried about being quartered because then you couldn't have a Christian burial. So under the 1752 Murder Act and the 1832 Anatomy Act, it ruled that criminals could be sentenced to dissection as a punishment, because it meant that you could no longer go to God at the very end.
That's really recent, isn't it, for that? I mean, they're not far off finding penicillin, then.
No, I know. It's about the age of my house. Strange. All of which brings us to the cruel and unusual punishment of the scores. Coming in first with surgical precision. Oh, my goodness, with 8 points. It's Stephen!
Goodness. Thank you so much.
In second place, it's Alan. 7 actual points. And in third place with -5, Victoria. -6, it's Claudia. But Claudia is not last. In last place with -10, it's the audience. Which means I only have to thank Claudia, Stephen, Victoria and Alan, and I leave you with this quirky quotation from George Carlin. Isn't it a bit unnerving that doctors call what they do practice? Thank you and good night. To an episode of QI where I'll be asking quite interesting questions about questions and qualifications. I will be invigilating. The panel's phones have been confiscated, and joining me are the neatly underlined Nish Kumar. The slightly smudged Adi Adepitan. Asking for extra paper, it's Holly Walsh. No, you can't go to the bathroom. Alan Davis. And their buzzers are all asking the really big questions. Holly goes...
Where have all the flowers gone?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? Yeah. Addie goes...
Is this the real life? Is this just fantasy?
Nish goes...
Is there life on Mars?
Alan goes...
What's new, pussycat?
There's the school bell. There are 8 questions tonight, and you should attempt 3 of them. Please show you're working. You can turn your papers over and start now.
This is my worst nightmare.
Oh my God.
This is terrible.
Oh, God.
Does it make you actually feel
Yeah, I
slightly
feel
anxious?
physically sick.
I am sweating.
I have anxiety dreams to this day that I haven't sat my A-levels. And I wake up and I'm like, oh, my God, thank God I'm 38. I'm 22. I still think about it.
These have been made up for us, and it says on the inside, this page has been left intentionally blank. And it says here, this one was an accident. Anybody have a disastrous exam at all?
I remember once I had an exam. Well, we had this big questionnaire from our careers advisors. And I remember the first question on it said, in a perfect world, what would your job be? And the boy next to me wrote, war correspondent.
Wow.
In a perfect world.
There's quite a good list of equipment required on the
Oh, yes, what have you got?
paper. Well, it says you need a Walther PPK with silencer.
Mine's got for equipment required disposable gloves and a schematic of Dungeness B power station.
I've got a kilogram of self-raising flour and a map of Sheffield town centre.
Mine just says, bring your own booze.
Let me ask you a question that is not on paper. What is the hardest exam in the world?
I mean, I hope the answer's doctor.
No, this is actually apparently tougher than that.
Oh, isn't it a vet is harder than being a doctor? Because that's what vets always say. They're like, oh, doctors do it in 7.
Yeah.
We do it in 9 or
Yeah, with our
11.
hands up a cow's arse, yeah.
What are you diagnosing there?
I'm not a vet, darling, I have no idea, but...
You're blanking your way through the exam.
Yeah.
Stick it up there.
Yeah, exactly.
Sandy, I don't know why in your thing of you putting your hand up a cow's arse, you're also doing a Bangla move.
Inside the cow, reaching out. Is it to get a job at Apple or Google or one of those?
No, so it's to be in charge of something incredibly important and powerful.
The Hadron Collider or something like that?
I just think the Hadron Collider is just things colliding a little bit, isn't it?
It's really simple. That.
Yeah,
Just stick
to be a big thing. It's the test to become a commander of a Royal Navy submarine. Is thought to be the hardest exam in the world. It is, in fact, known as the Perisher. Officially, it's called the Commanding Officers Qualifying Course, but it's so tough that officers from other nations think it's the thing to take. The failure rate, it varies from year to year, but it's about 30 to 45%.
Wow.
And if you fail, you cannot serve on a sub in any capacity.
You can serve in Subway, though.
The elves have just told me that it's a myth about the 9 years for a vet training. It can be done in 4.
I don't believe that. Because I've met a lot of vets, and they would...
Maybe they were just slow, darling. It could have been done in 4. Right. Took me 9 years. Wait a minute, that one's a cow, and that one's a horse.
When you're a doctor, you only have to know how one, organism works. But when you're a vet,
yes,
people come in with, oh, my stick insect's got eczema, and then someone else is like, this horse is going to explode!
It's gonna blow! Is it ticking?
That's the ultimate Trojan horse.
Absolutely.
It's simple. You just stick your hand up its arse and give it one of these. That's me unscrewing the bomb.
I think animals are like cars. They all work the same way, really.
We've spent a fortune on my cat. I've spent over £1,000 in the last 2 years on my cat.
£1,000?
Trying to make it into a dog.
So, what's wrong with the bloody thing, apart from it's a cat?
They're hard to come by cats, aren't they, after all?
You know those bits of elastic that keep chicken legs together like that? It swallowed one of those and it went all through its system, tied up tied it all up.
That's why you need to go up.
Yeah,
and go
exactly.
Get it out.
Anyway, she died, so that's fine.
Oh, my God.
Well, I wasn't going to pay £1,000. Come on.
So, submarines, they do 3 months of theoretical work. There are simulations and exercises at sea. They're kept sleep-deprived and stressed. They get them drunk and see how they operate with a hangover. And nevertheless, right on the very last day, you can fail. And if you do fail, you get called into the captain's cabin, you're given a glass of whiskey, and you're escorted to land, and you never serve on a submarine again.
At least you get a glass of whiskey.
Yeah. In America, you have to pass a 150-question exam to become a certified cheese professional. You need, I love this, 4,000 hours of working with cheese.
I've got that already. I just stand in front of the fridge and, like, eat it, because there's no calories if you take it straight out of the fridge.
Is that right? No, there's a reading list of at least 32 books that you have to read.
A cheese reading list?
Cheese reading list, yes.
Is that a sort of health and safety reading list?
It's about origins, manufacturing, pasteurising, all of the different elements.
I reckon after about 3,000 hours, you get cheese bored.
To get a master sommelier diploma, so in other words, to know everything there is to do with wine, you have to identify a wine by its grape, by its region, the year. And since 1940, only 200 people have passed the exam.
Don't they get their noses insured for, like, hundreds of thousands of pounds? It's all about having a good nose.
You can't smoke as well, because that kills all your taste buds and smell buds.
Who wants to have a glass of wine without a
Booze
fag,
and
eh?
fag.
Oh, yeah, master sommelier, mate.
I mean, this is absolutely true. I have never done cocaine, and I told a friend of mine that, and he said, it's a real waste of that nose.
Right, moving on. Exam papers away, please.
Oh, phew.
Can you name the question in the least successful poll of all time?
Should the United Kingdom be or remain in the European Union? Take that, people on the internet who say, I bring everything back to Brexit.
It is not that.
Not that.
Although it is to do with Europe, I can tell you that. So when's the last time there was a massive bust-up with Europe?
1939.
Yeah, so the Second World War.
That was a bust-up, wasn't it?
That was... it was a to-do.
It was.
Carry on.
It was a fracas.
We had a poll?
There was a wonderful and eccentric scientist called Geoffrey Pike, and he tried to avert World War II using an opinion poll.
We tried everything.
What he was interested in was having some kind of plebiscite, finding out what the public wanted. And Hitler had frequently relied on plebiscites to gauge opinions, and they were rather fashionable and plausible, and Pike thought that he could sway opinion. So in 1933, the Oxford Union had held a debate in which the student audience had declared they would not fight for king and country, and the press reported that Hitler had taken a very close interest in the result. In 1939, Pike sent 10 specially trained volunteers to Germany to question the populace, to work out how they felt, and then he was going to present Hitler with the detailed findings, and hopefully he thought it would put Hitler off from going to war.
Well, that worked, didn't it?
Well, it's such a British idea, because he said he didn't want the men to openly say why they were doing it, so they all went disguised as golfers. And each one interviewed 10 Germans a day, asking whether Germany could win the war.
Dressed as golfers?
Dressed as golfers, yes. And then Pike wanted to meet them and find out what they were doing, and he thought it was too much to also go as a golfer, so he sneaked in...
He went as a sheep.
He went as a canary buff, complete with a caged canary. And he had code names. He used to write to his spies as Aunt Marjorie. And they did find the results that they were looking for. Most Germans didn't want to go to war. They were ambivalent about the Nazis, but sadly, it was a bit late. They went in August 1939, and of course, war broke out in the start of September. But don't you love that a man thought, I know what we'll do. We'll go disguised as golfers.
Just
Sort
so random.
Yeah. Geoffrey Pike went to the polls to try and prevent Hitler going to the polls.
There's the war happening now, you know.
Why did Charles Darwin's son send questionnaires to lunatic asylums? So Charles Darwin's interest was...
Well, evolution. Maybe some was, I don't know, trying to set up a business in straitjackets and he was doing market research or something.
No, it's absolutely to do with the similar sort of things that Charles Darwin was interested in. So this is his son, George, who kept up all the research that Darwin had been doing. Darwin was particularly interested in breeding. He'd married his cousin. Does that help you?
And he was worried he might have mad children.
He was worried about madness. He was worried about interbreeding. There was a theory that cousin marriage might correlate with blindness and deafness and other medical conditions, and he lobbied to have a question in the census, asking people whether they had married their cousins. And this was refused.
But it's legal to marry your first... Please tell me it's legal.
Yes, darling.
Okay, fine.
It is entirely legal. So he was interested in interbreeding and cousin marriages, and his son, George, carried on with this, and he studied Burke's Landed Gentry and the Pall Mall Gazette and so on, and he sent questionnaires to various lunatic asylums to try and find out. And there was no unusual rates of inbreeding in asylums, but he did learn that the nobility are twice as likely to marry their cousins. As common as why might that be?
They're all trying to keep the titles and
keep
property
the
and
dosh.
stuff within... Yeah, keep the dosh within the family.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's estimated that if you marry your cousin and you have a child, it's sort of 4 to 7% of the children will have birth defects, but that's compared to 3 to 4% for children whose parents are not closely related, so it's not that much of a difference. The real problem comes when you have another generation, then there's lots and lots of interbreeding, and then you get genetic defects. So they weren't allowed to ask whether you'd married your cousin, but the idea of regular census also caused trouble. That was proposed in 1753. I love this. Parliament said no. It would molest and perplex every single family in the kingdom. There was a man called John Rickman, and he wrote an article suggesting that people should count the population, because some people said the population was expanding too fast and some people said it was declining, so they were talking about 1,800. And he wrote and said, I think the government should count the people, and he should never have done that, because he then had to run the census for the next 40 years. But there's some wonderful stuff in the census. In 1911, one man lists his lodger as Peter Tabby, who is Persian and employed as a mouser. And census official, no sense of humour, crossed it out and written, this is a cat. And weird number of people working in billiard halls in 1911. Why might that be?
Well, putting that down, but you suspect it's not their real
Yes,
occupation.
so there was a sport where the people wanted to claim that they were still amateurs, but they weren't really. They were working professionally, but it would spoil the game if they claimed. Do you know what it was?
Boxing?
No, it's football. Football. Yeah, so you would put yourself down as a person working in a billiard hall. And a huge number of slaves in the 1911 census, and those were, of course, suffragettes. And the brilliant Emily Wilding Davison, on the night of the census, you had to put where you had slept that night. She hid in a cupboard in Parliament so that she could put Houses of Parliament as her address. And Tony Benn eventually put a plaque up in the cupboard you can go and visit and see where she hid.
That would be an embarrassing one-night stand, wouldn't it?
What?
Hey, sorry about this. What's your address? Had to fill in the census and...
Some people are introverts, some are extroverts. What kind of vert are you?
I see myself as a very chilled-out person.
Right.
But, people who've come and watched me play basketball think that I'm absolutely bonkers and that I'm an extrovert because I hate the opposition, so I'll call them whatever and
Really? Does it bring out an aggression in you?
Well, do you know what? I don't notice it. I suppose when I've got someone in a headlock, then maybe that's...
Fairly clear. Yeah. So if you had to pick introvert or extrovert, what would you pick?
I think I'm a bit of both, actually.
I think you would be right. I think, as far as we can tell, most people are, in fact, a bit of both. Do anybody know who came up with the idea of introverts and extroverts?
Oh, Mr. Vert.
Mr. Vert.
First name Per.
I really hope they use that as the still for radio.
Me and Alan were just perfect.
People will be like, I knew it. I knew they'd catch up with them one day.
It was Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychoanalyst.
Oh, what a
great
portrait!
glasses. Great.
Good, isn't it? I don't know how he could see through them. That's weird. So it's about your motivation. So either you get your motivation from within yourself, and that makes you an introvert, or from your surroundings and your relationships, and that makes you an extrovert. But Jung himself said that introverts and extroverts are the minorities, and we're mostly ambiverts.
Ambivert?
Ambivert. You're an ambivert.
Yeah.
You can vert with both hands.
Nice.
But it's very bad news for something called the Myers-Briggs type indicator.
Oh, is that
that's insanity.
personality types.
It's a personality test. So it was invented by a woman called Catherine Briggs and then her daughter, Isabel Myers, and they worked on it together. They had no particular expertise in this area, and they developed it because Catherine Briggs met her future son-in-law, didn't think he fitted with the family, and wanted to find out why. So she developed this personality test and basically divides people into particular types of categories. So you get extroverts versus introverts, which we already know, not really a thing, and then sensing versus intuitive, thinking versus feeling, and judging versus perceiving. The thing about it is, it's really sort of nonsense, but it is used by HR departments around the world. 2 million people take this test every year in 26 different countries. In the USA alone, 200 federal agencies use it, and it really is ridiculous. It's a bit like the horoscope. You just can't divide the whole world up into 12 categories.
Oh, that's classic Libra, that is.
My dad was forced to take it at work. I don't know how he managed this, but I think he failed. The guy said I was basically a sociopath, and he told me, my mother and my brother, and we took, in his words, too long to respond. No, Dad!
The problem with it is it's too binary. It's an either-or thing that you have to use to determine personality. Ridiculous. It's also self-reporting, so if you think, for example, that you're an extrovert, that is pretty much the result that you're going to come out with. The real problem is that about half the people who take it a second time come out with a completely different result, so it clearly doesn't work. The one I think is most extraordinary is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory.
I used that when I was dating.
566 questions, was that how many you put?
Very choosy.
Yeah. Did you marry well in the end, darling?
Yeah, he's a psychopath, but yeah.
Oh, it was first written in 1943, and it's been updated a few times, but you basically just have to say true or false, OK? So I'm going to ask those of you who are able, please, will you stand up so that we can see whether you can pass my test here, please?
There's a couple of people here dressed as golfers.
OK. So, hands on your head for true, hands on your bottom for false. True or false? At times, I have a strong urge to do something harmful or shocking.
Oh, my God,
Wow. OK. True or false? I have never indulged in any unusual sex practices.
Unusual is a loose word.
Yeah, it is.
I mean... Yeah, I had a wank in a porta cabin once. Is that...
That was my dressing room, you bastard. These are genuine questions from this test. I would like to hunt lions in Africa. True or false? Hardly anybody. That's quite a few. True or false? I am fascinated by fire. Oh, wow! OK, and finally, true or false? I am a special agent of God. Thank you very much. Right, applaud yourselves. That was very good. Very well done. Genuine questions to try and decide whether or not somebody would be suitable for a job as a clerk. But the Americans still sort of do that, because when you go into America, you have to sign a thing that says, I'm not intending to commit moral turpitude.
Where's turpitude?
Yeah, I was going to say...
Which is naughtiness. But if you're going to do it, I'm going to guess you don't really care about ticking the box or not.
They still have the question of, are you planning on doing a terrorist attack?
I think they probably phrase it differently if...
Have I been getting a different immigration form? My one also said, do you plan to make a lot of curry? What is going on?
White people's is, how do you feel about quiche?
Now, for a bit of role play, 3 of you have got police hats under your desk. Paddy, I want you to play good cop. Holly, you play bad cop. Alan, you're going to be normal cop.
I know, it's good.
I
There
don't
we
have
go.
the voice to play a bad cop.
Go for it.
I can't, I can't swear with this voice. It doesn't, give me your fucking secrets. It just sounds delightful.
Nish has a secret. I want the 3 of you to find out what it is. Please.
You look like a traffic warden.
Right.
It looks like someone from the Village People.
I think he's about to go to a hen night and strip.
Right, Nish is in the spotlight.
Oh, my
He's got
God.
a secret. Come on.
This is American immigration all over again.
Go on, you start.
I know you've got something going on, mate.
Wow! Leave it, you've gone too far.
Oh, we're a comedian, are we?
Yeah, Actually, yes.
No, you'd be nice. You'd be nice.
It's a lovely beard you have there, Nish.
Thanks very much, Addy. I've had it combed, and I also really love the fact that you've turned your policeman hat backwards and are wearing it like Samuel L. Jackson's Kangol.
That's what I'm talking about.
Hashtag time's up. We can't flirt at work anymore.
Wait, hang on. You're supposed to be the bad cop.
All right, Sonny Jim.
Sonny Jim!
I'm sorry about this, Mr. Kumar. It's an absolute nightmare.
It's like being interrogated by Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins.
Just tell us what the secret is and I'll call her off.
I haven't got a secret. I'm an upstanding member of society. I've not even taken cocaine, in spite of the size and volume of my nose.
Good cop?
Tell us your secret.
No, that's not good. Good would be like, listen, sir, I'm terribly sorry.
We switched round. Oh, we're switching round.
Yeah.
Tell us your secret, you... Sonny Jim!
Are you going to confess?
I will confess to farting in Sandy's dressing room.
Oh, my God! Nish farted in Sandy's...
Get them to sign it.
You have a right to remain silent but violent.
I'm really worried, Holly, you're getting into it now.
Shut your face!
So here's the thing about the good cop, bad cop thing. What we do know is it's a very, very good way, if you want to prize a confession out of somebody, it is not a good means of actually discovering the truth. So somebody will just confess, but it's not... Was it true?
So Nish wasn't telling the truth then?
No, darling, he's never been allowed in my dressing room. It's been tested by scientists, and they carried out all sorts of experiments to emotionally destabilise their subjects and then try to manipulate them. But it doesn't work. The thing that did work, which I think is really interesting, they did a test in America on people jaywalking across the road. So jaywalking in America is taken very seriously. They fine you quite heavily.
Jay-wheeling as well.
Jay-wheeling, exactly.
Just saying.
Yeah.
Shut it!
Yeah, all right. So whenever somebody was seen jaywalking, a researcher blew a loud whistle, so they thought the police were right behind them. And when they spun round, they saw it was a civilian. They then continued on their way. They were then interrupted by a charity mugger who asked for money without giving a single reason, and people who had felt frightened and then relieved were much more likely to simply hand over money for no reason whatsoever. People are much easier to manipulate when they've been through an upsetting experience. Anyway, good cop, bad cop is not much cop. Can you name the world's most dangerous snack?
I don't like Turkish Delight.
Do you not? Why do you not like it?
I tried to flush it down the toilet once.
Yeah. Does it not flush? Does it bounce back?
Not flush.
Yeah.
It won't go down under any circumstances. It just keeps coming back. It's the single most buoyant confectionery on the market.
That's good to know. So we're heading back to Anglo-Saxon times. It's sort of trial by cheese on toast. So there was a thing called a korsned. It was a consecrated piece of bread and cheese, and it was used in a trial. The priest wrote the Lord's Prayer onto the bread, and...
You're not going to eat anything that's got the Lord's Prayer written.
Well, you were made to, because you're being accused of something, and so the idea is that you have to swallow the bread and cheese while another prayer is being read out over your head, and if you swallow the morsel without any difficulty, you get off. If you are guilty, it was believed that the cursed morsel would turn you pale, you would convulse and choke. And you could request this. You could say, I will take the trial of the cursed morsel, please. But the weird thing is that people did choke and die. And I wonder whether it is because they were so anxious that this, you know, it had this power.
But if you believed it, you would be.
Yeah. The alternative, which was used in trials of the clergy, was to swallow a piece of food with a feather in it, concealed, and it was considered you were guilty if you choked on that. I would imagine most people would choke.
An updated version of that is if you swallow the elastic band on a...
There's an amazing woman, a 19th century queen of Madagascar. She was known as Rana Valonva, but her full name is Rabodo Andrian Amponi Marina. Isn't that a fantastic name?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you put that as a password and it said weak, you'd be annoyed, wouldn't you?
Yeah. No numbers in it.
Yeah, but all the O's are zeros.
She was possibly the most murderous woman in history, and she did one of these trials by ordeal. There's a highly poisonous nut called tangena, and she used to make suspected criminals swallow that, accompanied by 3 pieces of chicken skin, and then they'd be forced to vomit. And if they vomited up all 3 pieces of skin, the defendant was deemed innocent, and if not, they were hacked to death.
Why was she such a bitch?
Well, she reduced her population from 5 million to 2.5 million between 1833 and 1839.
Holy
she killed
shit.
half the population.
That's ridiculous.
My God, that's full Thanos.
That's ridiculous.
So basically, she killed Christians and then people who got cross about it. In 1845, she repelled an Anglo-French invasion, and she had the heads of the invaders' corpses placed on poles and erected along the beach to bid farewell to the French and British ships as they retreated. She was really horrendous.
Well, you can go there on holiday now.
You can now. No, it's perfectly fine.
She doesn't feature in the animated cartoon. Never mentioned it. And Rabodo Adrian Marino will be voiced by Scarlett Johansson.
2.5 million people in 6 years is unbelievable, isn't it?
That's like, you know, you find that out on the 3rd date and you're like, I don't think we're going to see each other anymore.
To get to the end of Take Me Out. And he goes, there's one thing you should know. One of these 2 ladies is the genocidal maniac.
Anyway, moving on. Why do English paintings have so many squirrels in them?
I've never noticed a squirrel, but
Well, we-
I've seen that one.
Are they sort of like symbols for nut hoarding?
Is it because they had amazing agents and they just managed to get them in all the big paintings?
Like the Kate Moss of
Yeah,
squirrels.
exactly.
Yeah. It's specifically 18th century paintings, and there's a possible reason. At the time, it was common to keep squirrels as pets. Apparently, they often walked around with their owners and they would have little chains and that kind of thing. But why would I ask you this question? Where do you think this question has come from?
Oh, is this one of the first questions in the citizenship test?
This is the one they should have asked instead of, do you want to be in or out of here?
Squexit means Squexit.
Well, before the internet, people used to go to the library to ask questions, and there's a wonderful list of questions that the New York Public Library has been asked since the 1940s. They keep a record of them. This is one of the questions. Why do 18th century English paintings have so many squirrels in them? And there was a follow-up question. How did they tame them so they wouldn't bite the painter? Which I quite like as a follow-up question.
I get asked random questions
Do you?
all the time. So, are you you? I mean, what does that mean? Is this an existential question? Are you you?
It's better than didn't you used to be you?
Yeah. But then there was one time when I answered, I think you mean, am I that guy off to you? And I said, yes. And then someone else then said, no, it's not him. And then I proceeded to have an argument about whether I was...
Someone did that to me once. They went, where do I know you from? I was on the train and she was going, where do I know you from? I know you from somewhere. Where do I know you from? And, like, it went on for ages. Yeah. Eventually, I was like... Sometimes I do TV, you might have seen me on that. And she went, no, you're in my Pilates class. And I was in her Pilates class.
You were?
Yeah.
The question I get asked most common are you sure you're not Ramesh?
Bless.
Yeah, I get that one. I get...
What, are you sure you're not Ramesh?
No. Never had that one. Are you that geezer? Are you that geezer? And I say, yeah, I'm that geezer. And then they go, no, you ain't.
I like these other questions. Where can I rent a guillotine?
I don't want to buy one.
Yeah.
If I want to borrow one, I'm prepared to pay a reasonable hire fee.
Yeah.
Used once.
And sometimes the questioner could write back. This one is from 1967. The question, what is the natural enemy of a duck? The librarian, what do you mean? Reply, well, a whole flight of them landed in my pool and I have waved a broom at them, but all they do is look at me and quack. I thought I could introduce the natural enemy into the pool area.
Surely the natural enemy of the duck is some small pancakes and hoisin sauce.
No, it's a dog with a canoe.
The library continues this service. They receive about 30,000 calls a year, and they can even outfox the experts. They were asked, could you tell me the thickness of a US postage stamp with the glue on it? And the library replied, sorry, we couldn't tell you that quickly. Why don't you try the post office? And they got the reply, this is the post office. 1967, they got a call from a woman saying, when you meet a fellow and you know he's worth $27 million and you know his nationality, how do you find out his name? Now, what question was asked immediately after Waterloo?
That's a very bold position the commander's taken.
Also, I'd say, you know, wearing white trousers in a war zone.
He also appears to have taken his genitals off and left them at home. For fear of losing them in the height of battle. So they just finished the battle. What's the first question anybody asked?
Lunch?
It's a real problem with lots of battles, and it's what to call it. Nobody knew it was called Waterloo then. You want to decide what to call it. So the British wanted Waterloo. It's not where the battle took place, but where Wellington had been headquarters. The French wanted Mont-Saint-Jean, which is, of course, the ridge where Wellington drew up his forces. And the Prussians preferred La Belle Alliance, which was the pub where Wellington and the Prussian commander Blücher met up near the end of the battle. And there was a real problem. People can't decide what battles ought to be called. Agincourt was originally called the Battle in Picardy. Battle of Bosworth did not get its name for 25 years. And sometimes it rather depends on what side you're on. So in the American Civil War, the first Battle of Bull Run and the first Battle of Manassas are exactly the same battle. It just depends which side.
Right, OK.
But the weird thing is, in the wake of World War I, about 1,600 babies were named after battles or theatres of action. So you had children called things like Belgium and Calais. And then girls in particular named after battles. So you get things like Sumeria, Verdunia, Dardanella. Richard Burton's brother was called Verdun, like about 900 other babies. And then after the war, of course, you get children called Peace and Armistice and so on.
That child on the left is possessed. That's the creepiest baby I've ever seen in my life.
You know who that is? That's Claudia and the other one from Strictly.
It's the other one, Tess.
As babies.
And now, to really test who's qualified for the job, we come to the question of general ignorance. Fingers on buzzers, please. What's the best thing for an exhausted bee?
Is there life?
Nish.
Honey?
Addy. What do you reckon, Addy?
Sugar water?
Speed.
So here's the thing, never give it honey. The RSPB say feeding a tired bee honey, it's really a short-term solution. It needs nectar.
Why are the RSPB wading in on this? That's not a bird. Keep their beaks out of it.
They do all sorts of damage because, first of all, honey contains spores of bacteria, and it's perfectly possible the bee may pick those up and take them home and infect the entire hive. It needs nectar, is what it needs.
Who's got nectar? I mean, really?
They're called flowers. The thing is, darling, it either needs a rest, or it needs to be left alone so it will be encouraged to go and pollinate, or it could just be dying. In which case, the kindest thing is to sit with it and give encouragement, I think. Also, if you make the sugar too thick, you could block up the bee's proboscis. You could then stop it being able to get the nectar at all. I mean, there's nothing really good about giving any honey water or any sugary water whatsoever. Have more bee-friendly flowers in your garden is the best thing you could do.
But that's not something you can do there and then. I mean,
No, that's tricky. Just suddenly planting a buddleia just for the sake of it. Here's a few bee facts. Bees have furry tongues. They have long hairs to trap the nectar.
But what sort of bees make milk?
What sort of bees make milk?
Boobies.
Series to raise the toe.
Sorry.
Boobies.
One for the kids.
They've got furry tongues. They've also got furry eyes. That's quite weird, right? Yeah, so they have those big compound eyes. They've got hairs between them. They grow at the intersection of the lenses. What I particularly love about bees, they can really take their alcohol. OK, so scientists fed them pure ethanol, and they can drink the human equivalent of 10 litres of wine in a single sitting. Wow. Yeah, I know. Give it up for the bee.
Oh, come on, we've all done that when we've been dumped.
The best thing you can do for a bee is stock your garden full of flowers. What do bears do in winter?
Shit in the woods. Well, obviously hibernate, right?
Oh!
watch TV?
No, they're not true hibernators. So there are a few species that go into a deep sleep. It's called a torpor, but it's not hibernation. So a hibernating animal will not wake if there's a loud noise or if you touch it or you move it. But bears in torpor, they can wake really easily. And hibernating animals, their temperatures drop a tremendous deal, whereas the bears just decreases a little bit in torpor, much less dramatic. So the only British mammals which truly hibernate are things like hedgehogs and dormice.
Middle-aged men.
Middle-aged men, bats. So bears don't shit in the woods in the winter. Why? Why do they not do that?
Cold, innit?
Yeah, so what do they... That is true. So what do they do instead?
They pay you good money to just...
Banger it up.
Either they go or they don't go.
They don't go
keep
at all.
it in.
They keep it in. So how...
So their first poo of the spring...
Good Lord.
Woo!
Oh, my God. It must be like that bit in Ghostbusters when all the ghosts escape out of the set.
But there's a particular way they keep it in. Does anybody know what the particular way is that they keep it in?
Cross their legs.
OK, you are the closest. It is...
Really?
Yes.
A cork?
Yes, a cork.
I thought you said pork.
They use a small pig.
Imagine my confusion when
Yes.
he says pork and you go, you're very close.
They make a fecal plug. It's called a tappin. It's sort of faeces dried out and hardened, and then they bung it up inside, and it stays that way for 6-7 months.
Oh!
And then shoots out in a massive...
It is, let's say it's jettisoned in the usual way. Apparently it's not a terrible smell. The North American Bear Centre insists the odour is light and not unpleasant. Why do bears, when they're in torpor, suck their paws?
Because they're holding in 2 months' worth of... They're just like...
When they're bedding down, they sort of lick and suck them. Anybody know what the reason might be?
Is it for moisture?
Well, what they're trying to do is they have calloused foot pads, and they're just trying to get rid of them and encourage a fresh new foot.
So it's basically
pads.
a pedicure.
It is fundamentally a pedicure. And
They
want
wake up in the spring with very tender feet. Desperate for the loo.
Yeah.
all the pine needles.
Look, I'm just going to have to go where I am.
They just fire themselves out of or into the woods.
And the vet's
I'm
like,
back.
this bear is going to explode!
It's exactly like that. Exactly. Anyway, moving on. Have a look at this sequence. It goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 31. What is wrong with the sequence?
Well, they're all doubling up, aren't they?
Yeah.
Apart
And
from the
then
last
there's
one's
one...
one...
So it should be
32,
what? It should be 32. So I love this because it is a sort of philosophical thing. The fact is, we simply don't have enough information here in order to give a single unique solution. So it would be that if everything was doubled... Sorry, I got my stick out. So if you have a quick look at this, so the sequence is actually the number of regions in a circle and divided by the lines connecting a number of points. So if you have a look here, here's the 1, and there's 1 point, so we have just 1 region. Here is the 2, so we have 2 points, and we have divided it into 2 regions. When you get 3 points like that, it divides into 4 regions. 4 points like this, 8 regions. 5, it becomes 16 regions, but when you have 6 points, there are 31 regions, and therefore it is a completely correct sequence that it should go 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 31. So there are at least 2 valid answers. 32 just seems to us to be the more obvious one. But
That's because of the darts.
What?
32.
Is that in darts?
Yeah. In darts, it's very important, if you can, to try to get to a double 16.
OK.
Because if you miss it, your next dart is probably going to be on a double 8. And if you miss that, you'll be on a double 4.
Right.
But if you're on a double and another double,
Yes.
double 17, for
Yes.
example, and you miss it and you hit the 17, you're not now on a double. You've got to get another odd number, and then you can go on to a double.
How many
it's best
people...
if you can
Yes.
to work to 32.
Right.
Are there any darts players in who'll back me up?
Yeah.
3. The QI audience and the darts audience.
I went to the Ali Pali darts at Christmas.
Why?
I had the best night of my life. You have to go in fancy dress. Half the people there are British and the other half are Dutch, and no one speaks each other's language, but you're best friends with them by the end of the night.
Why? Sorry, why Dutch?
It's because it's flat.
All in a honestly...
Let me know when you're going, I'll come.
And
God,
I
love
won't.
that.
So we're really... Is it an Olympic sport, darts? Is it an Olympic...
No, should be, though.
Anyway, I really, really like that we just didn't know enough to say what comes next, so it's a nice QI philosophical point. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 31 is a perfectly sensible answer as long as you're asking the right question. If you hold your breath underwater, what is it that makes you want to come up for air?
I mean, the obvious thing is lack of oxygen.
To breathe.
That it's not lack of oxygen.
Too much carbon dioxide.
It is too much. It's the... Yeah, exactly right. Yes. It's our body sensing an excess of carbon dioxide, not a lack of oxygen. You can actually last more than twice as long as the CO2 reflex makes us think. So competitors of something called static apnea, this is an inexplicable thing you do, lying face down in the water and holding your breath. They learn to completely ignore this reflex and they force themselves to stay underwater until their oxygen has genuinely run out, rather than coming up when your internal CO2 sensors go off. So there's a guy called Branko Petrovic of Serbia. He currently holds the static apnea record. Imagine this. He's lying face down in the water. His record is 11 minutes and 54 seconds. Wow. I know, it doesn't sound like it's going to be possible.
Why would you do that?
It's just a proper sport. So here's the thing. If you breathe pure oxygen, first, it forces CO2 out of your body, so you can last longer. I mean, some people consider it cheating, but it is a way of doing it. Alexei Segura of Spain holds the record 24 minutes and 3 seconds.
Holding his breath.
Can he breathe through his bumhole?
Not if he's a bear.
No, certainly not if he's a bear. Stay in your seats, the bell doesn't dismiss you. I do. Let's take a look at the scores. In first place, graduating summa cum laude. Oh, my word, with minus 13. It's Holly. In second place, scraping through on a 2-2, frankly, with minus 14, Addy. In third place, with a fictional diploma from Trump University on minus 19, Alan. And in last place, with minus 27, barely qualified to wipe his own bottom, it's Nish. That's it for this edition of QI. Thanks to Addy, Holly, Nish and Alan. And I leave you with a quaint thought on qualifications from Rita Mae Brown. Education is a wonderful thing. If you couldn't sign your name, you'd have to pay cash. Good night. Good morrow, noble kinsfolk. I bid ye welcome to the fair realm of QI, where this day we sally forth upon a quest with our knights quadruple. All hail the valiant and mighty Sir Philip the Jupitus. The gallant and audacious Sir Alan Dakar. The puissant and fearless Lady Alice Levine. And the knight on the tiles, Alan Davis. But, hark, list ye to their nightly noises. Sir Philip the Jupitus goes... Sir Alan Dakar goes... Lady Alice Levine goes... And Alan goes... Right, draw your swords and prepare for combat.
I can't actually move with this.
It looks nice on you, weirdly.
Probably weirdly.
Oh, sorry.
Halfway through the show, he's going to go, oh, I feel drained.
Phil looks like he's got a wind machine on him.
No,
I saw a Labrador with its head out the car window.
Oh, nice. You can take them off, darling.
Well, how did they wear glasses in the olden days?
They hadn't invented glasses in the olden days, darling.
You see, I'm going to struggle on this show.
Phil, if you want to...
Oh, sorry, I was given to understand there was a beekeeping round.
I can't tell if you're coming or going.
Hello, I'm from Amsterdam. Would you like some lovely cheese?
Shall we start the show and do a question? So, what's this man's name?
Is it Don Quixote?
Yes, darling.
Don Quixote.
X is a ch sound, isn't it?
Well, the X is a sh, technically, because he's speaking Old Castilian in the book, and it should be Don Quixote.
Quixote.
But I think we could say Quixote, don't you, Dave?
Well, is Don short for something like Donald or Donna?
No, it was more of an honorary title.
Like the Don.
Yeah, like the Don, yeah.
right.
But quiche OT, that sounds like an Irish order, doesn't it? I'll have quiche OT.
Quiche.
Yeah. Actually, technically, he's not called any of those things because the protagonist in the book is called Alonso Quijano. So Don Quixote is a name he makes up for himself when he loses his marbles and assumes the character of a medieval knight. Lots of people argue it is the world's first modern novel.
Where do they argue?
In the literary world, my darling.
Oh.
He wrote it in prison, actually, which seems to be a good place to write a book. And it was an immediate and roaring success. So the question is, why might Elizabeth I not have read it?
She could read, couldn't she?
Do you know she could read in 6 languages?
Does she like beach reads, like the kind of big paperback?
Danielle Steele.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the one thing that we know about Elizabeth I? Anything?
Didn't she lose all her teeth?
Yes, that wasn't the thing I was looking for, but yes, that is...
Because I based my act on her.
What is a big event in history that Elizabeth I...
To do with the Spanish, isn't it?
Yes.
The Armada.
Spanish Armada,
So
absolutely.
she wasn't reading a lot of Spanish literature?
Oh.
No, Cervantes was a buying agent for the Spanish Armada.
Very good pronunciation of Cervantes.
Cervantes.
Cervantes. I can say that.
Yeah. Is that 2 beers?
Yeah.
That's all my Spanish as well. But actually, that thing that you were doing, that is a little bit like Elizabeth I when she'd lost all her teeth, apparently. Foreign ambassadors couldn't understand her. And she, obviously, because she was queen, she carried on chatting.
If she's anything like my nan, I'll tell you what Queen Elizabeth I was saying. Go and get us 20 senior service.
In the novel itself, Don Quixote goes mad because of reading. It used to be believed that reading, or what they called excessive contemplation, was incredibly bad for you, and it caused the most astonishing range of illnesses. So if you read too much, you could get all of these things, according to Dr. Robert Burton: gout, catarrhs, wasting, indigestion, colic, crudities, vertigo, consumption and wind. All caused by reading too much.
It's like the menu in a gastropub.
I feel like I'm in an exciting new hipster coffee bar. Oh, I'll have the colic, please.
The top 10 names in England in 2035. Yes, gout and wasting are at camp, but colics at home.
Can I just say, though, it's so nice to be with another Alan, because Alan...
Yeah.
They're like the White Rhino. They're going extinct. There's only me, you, and Alan Titchmarsh going. Did you know that? There's no other Alan. You think with me being on the telly, there'd be a few more, but sadly not.
I love you very much, Alan, but I think you being on television is not going to encourage the breeding of children. I'm just...
Backstage went, Alan, I know it's your first time on. I'll be very kind and very lovely. I'll be back in the playground. Won't you stamp on me glasses while you're at it?
What do you suppose a collective for Alans is? I wonder what the...
A pride.
A pride. You happy with that, Danny?
Yeah.
OK, fantastic. I'm pleased. Cervantes himself had quite an adventurous life. He was in the Spanish army, during which he got shot 3 times.
Well, he's got a sword in him there.
Oh, yes, that's not the thing.
Oh, I'll keep writing, don't worry.
He lost the use of his left arm. He was kidnapped and held captive as a slave for 5 years. He was arrested 3 times. He was excommunicated 3 times. I mean, he really had the most astonishing life.
Is he from Albert Square? That's a sort of CV of someone in EastEnders, all of those bad things happening to you.
Nasty Nick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, his death date is recorded as the 23rd of April, 1616. It is the same date as Shakespeare, and yet they died 10 days apart. How is that possible?
You're lying.
Yes. Correct. 10 points. No. 23rd of April, we celebrate St George's Day and Shakespeare's birthday, 1616. So Shakespeare famously died on his birthday. So The same day they are marked down as dying, and yet they died 10 days apart. How is that possible?
Is it that calendar they use?
It is that calendar they use.
Is it Julian calendar?
Yes, darling.
Which is also my drag name.
Darling, you've just got 10 points.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Entirely right. So Europe was using the Gregorian calendar and England was still using the Julian calendar. And so the dates are very slightly apart. Also, in Spain, the date of death was recorded as the day you were buried rather than the day you actually died. Now, what's the most thankless job in history?
It was being a mum, surely.
Don't try and get the mum vote.
We have to say thank you to Mum in our house. We won't get any biscuits.
What's the worst job you ever had, Alan?
I put the raisins into fruit and fibre. Yeah.
Did somebody else do the apple bits? You were only in charge of the raisins.
Yeah. They came in a big box. I tipped it. I didn't put them in individually. Wish I'd gone to school.
Anybody else? Terrible job?
I was once working at a record company and someone had a record out with a lyric in it that mentioned Mr. Potato Head. And so I was asked, as a promotional device, to carve faces into 100 potatoes.
OK. Most thankless job in history comes from ancient China. So we're going to go back to 400 to 100 BC. And there were people called Yusha, and they were on a constant quest to rescue anybody in trouble and to help the poor. But they hated being thanked because they were too modest. In fact, it was part of their fundamental beliefs that you should never receive praise. So they are almost the equivalent of the knight-errants, which is what Don Quixote was.
But were they really modest, or were they like, no, please don't, please don't, please don't,
please, no. They had codes of chivalry. So there was one called Chuchia, and he saved hundreds of people's lives, but whenever anybody thanked him, he couldn't bear it. Even when he saved a king's life, he refused to ever see him again just in case he was thanked. It was absolutely part of who they were. There's a period of time in China, it's the 250-year period of warring states, and lots of dynasties were fighting for control. In the end, the dynasty called Qin finally won. That's Q-I-N, and that is where China gets its name from the Qin dynasty. So you can see this area down here on the left. That only lasted for about 15 years. But in these times of untrustworthy government, instability, people turned to these more self-sacrificing Yusha knights to dispense justice instead. Actually, the Chinese made a TV series called Yusha, and it was based on an American television series. Can anybody imagine what it might have been?
Starsky and Hutch.
Well, you've got it in that the car is critical.
Oh, car 54, where are you?
Knight Rider, another point!
Oh, my God.
They actually made a real version of the car from Knight Rider in China, and they sold it. It was called the Yusha, and the operating system was called...
Kit.
Yes, name of Hasselhoff's car, and it featured all the sort of LEDs mimicking the ones from the show. Who doesn't want one of those?
The thing about Kit was, though, he was really sassy, so
Yeah.
he would always tell Michael that he was wrong.
Oh, but I'd really like that. If there was like a sat-nav that spoke back to you, I think that would be rather good fun.
What if it said, do you want to go to Sainsbury's, are you sure?
Surely Waitrose is more your style. I'd quite like it, I think, being the voice of sat-nav. Sasnav.
You can record your own.
Can you?
Yeah. I had a tom-tom, I did it on that.
How long does that take? Do you have to record every road ever?
No,
He's been doing it for 9 years. This week, he's been doing Lithuanian villages.
Where's Alan in the shed, like, oh, God, Grove Avenue, Grove Street, Grove Road?
It's, you know, you just go, turn left, but because it's you can go, turn left! Left now!
So wait, have you just done turn left in lots of different moods?
I've done all the different things in different moods, yeah.
But can you do mind that bus? Can you do that?
That nav doesn't tell you to mind that bus.
Oh, no, that is the children.
I like you have reached your destination and you haven't. I'd rather it just said, I think it's here somewhere.
Are all of yours a bit non-committal? Like, yeah, we could.
Yeah, it's round here. Have a look. Get out and look, why don't you? Buy a map. Buy a map.
Anyway, moving on. What's the lowest camping experience you can think of?
Oh, my God.
Oh, I was there that year.
Where is that?
That's Glastonbury, 2006 or 7. That was the year when there were police divers going into the tents looking for bodies.
Oh!
But I didn't find any, so it's all right.
It looks like a cross between camping and a soup from Wagamama's.
I went to Glastonbury once.
Yeah.
And I got absolutely paralytic. I woke up on the floor. Someone must have trodden on me because I had 2 footprints there. And someone had stubbed a fag out on my face.
No!
Yeah. How annoying can I be if I'm lying on the floor?
I'm talking about the lowest campsite in the world. It is 1.6 kilometres down inside the deepest cave on Earth. It is in Georgia, the Krubera Cave. It is obviously not open to your average camper. This is a genuine picture from the inside of the cave. It is 13 kilometres long, it is over 2 kilometres deep, and it can fill with water really fast with absolutely no warning whatsoever. Nevertheless, people go camping down inside this cave. So in 2018, 56 cavers from 7 different countries spent 4 weeks down inside. They were sleeping 6 to a tent, and for fun, they would dive down into sumps, which are sort of freezing... they're freezing cold passages submerged underwater, and squeeze as far as they could down these extremely narrow passageways. 4 weeks, can you imagine?
How much is it for a family of 4?
It's not for me.
What do you mean it's not for you? You're a perfect size for underground living. I can't get in that corridor. Where's Sandy? Sandy! Get down there, will you? Tell us if there's any sumps. You're like Stuart Little. We get you a little car. Go and find the interesting things underground, Sandy. And make sure you come back and we'll have a lovely bit of cheese for you.
So I was listening to that Flight of Fancy and you went cheese, and I thought, oh, I would come back for cheese. The deepest point of the cave is called the Terminal Sump.
Oh, dear.
And nobody knows how deep it is.
I've got one of those. Only my doctor knows where it is.
Well, I know a Ukrainian diver who could go and have a look. There's a man called Gennady Samokhin, and he holds the record for the deepest dive so far, 52 metres down to the Terminal Sump. Why would you do that?
I do not want to go any further down here. Sandy, go further. Where is Sandy in her tiny car?
The thing I love about this cave is the deepest terrestrial animal ever found on Earth lives there. It's a hexapod, 3 millimetres long, just a tiny little thing. It's called a Plutomorus autobalagnensis, and it lives at nearly 2,000 metres down. Do you not think that's astonishing that life is carrying on? This is not camping, it's living there full time.
I like that Alan went, oh, are you looking at the same picture? I didn't really think, oh.
You think it looks ugly, Alice, but you wait till you've seen Sandy doing dressage on one. Pops a little ribbon on it.
Those long
Trot
things...
on, Spiky.
They're too heavy for it.
It does look like it's weighed down.
Why have I got these? They're too heavy.
They put them back.
Yes. Just needs a bit of product.
Or a scrunchie.
Yes. Camping is a pastime. First documented, where do we reckon?
Early Victorian.
Early Victorians, it's British, so it's... Yeah, it is. The Victorians absolutely loved it. There was a great boating craze, so it was up and down the Thames, and some boats even converted into floating tents. The person we have to blame is a British tailor called Thomas Hiram Holding. He is regarded as the sort of father of lightweight camping. As a boy in 1853, he and his family went across the United States by a pioneer wagon across the prairies, and he absolutely loved it and has inflicted on the rest of us for all eternity that we have
Somebody
to go
that
camping.
wears a pussy bow is not genuinely camping. No. Like, I feel like he's got an inflatable mattress in there, he's got heaters, he's got hot water bottles.
Well, he...
A little mojito, yeah.
He rather hilariously produced the Camper's Handbook, and under meals suggestions, he provides recipes for blancmange and lobster salad.
Oh, just come out.
I can remember getting a vegetarian cookbook in the 80s and it had a crisp sandwich in it.
It's not much of a tent, is it?
But he has rowed there on dry land, which is quite impressive. So.
Tide's out. You say that's not much of a tent. He sold it to Eeyore just after this photograph.
Camping these days can get seriously intense. Come on.
Oh.
Come on.
And good night.
OK, moving on. From the deepest quest on Earth to the highest, what do Everest summiters come down with?
I was offered the chance to walk to base camp.
Right.
And I did 1 day's training on Hampstead Heath and declined.
They say Hampstead Heath's harder, so
You have to talk to the dog walkers.
All the dog walkers.
Oh. But there's only a fortnight in May and a fortnight in October when you can even go to the top. And the rest of the year, it's 400-mile-an-hour winds and -60.
Oh,
Why would anyone go up there? You're
I thought you were going to say it's all school groups.
No,
It's inundated.
If you do get permission to go, you have to queue. And people get really bad-tempered. There are many fights that break out as people are waiting. What do they come down with?
A Yeti.
A black eye, by the sounds of it, if everyone's like...
Or a fridge magnet, something like that.
One of those pens with something that slides.
Yeah.
A climber.
Well, there's a Sherpa in a bra.
He's down again.
Sir Edmund.
Wow. You can see his Hillary.
So the Tibetans don't call it Everest, they call it Chumalonga. And they employ, in fact, 30 porters. Their sole job is to carry poo down the mountain. Yes, to special pits further down the mountain.
You're not allowed to leave your poo up there.
Well, no. In fact, if you do climb up now, the Nepalese government, they require you to bring down 18 pounds of rubbish. That includes other people's poo, or you will lose your $4,000 deposit. Just over 26,000 pounds of human excrement is dumped at base camp.
Will the poo ever overtake...
We can do this! For comic relief.
But the Nepalese porters who carry it all down, they are astonishing. They use something called a numlo. It's a sling that goes across the forehead. And on average, the male porters can carry 90% of their body mass. And there's female porters as well. They can carry 66%. There's one porter who can carry twice his own body weight. Hillary went back to the Himalayas lots of times after climbing Everest. He led an expedition. He led an expedition to look for the abominable snowman. He concluded that it didn't exist.
No.
No. But the Nepalese government has Yeti hunting rules. You have to pay for a permit, is the first thing. You have to photograph or capture it. You're not allowed to kill it. And you have to turn it over or turn over the photographs of any sightings whatsoever.
I like the idea that Edmund Hillary's there at the press conference, and this is what we're looking for, and there's a bunch of Sherpas in front of him, and they go, oh, you mean Keith?
He said, and you see, no hat. This is how you can tell. The Yeti.
Or the centre parting, do you think they saw lots of ones with little side parties? Like, that's not the one I'm looking for. I want the one with the curtains.
If we cannot find the Yeti, we will settle for the lead singer of Herman's Hermits.
From mountains to cliffs, how did the first ever cliffhanger ending conclude?
With somebody falling off a cliff? Or somebody not falling off a cliff?
Where do we think it comes from, the idea of using a cliffhanger in a story?
Well, from serial storytelling. Was it Dickens?
This is a famous British author who first came up with this. Tess the D'Urbervilles, Obscure...
Thomas Hardy, did he
It is
do
Thomas
that?
Hardy. Thomas Hardy wrote a novel in 1873 called A Pair of Blue Eyes, and one of the characters, Henry Knight, is left dangling perilously off the edge of a cliff, and his love interest, Elfrida, she realises that he's in some terrible trouble, and this is rather shocking and daring at the time. She goes and takes off all her underwear in a bush and makes it into a rope and saves his life.
Makes her bush into a rope.
Is it Tess the D'Urbervilles? There's a wonderful line, and it says, it's dark, and she's walking along, and she suddenly felt a huge erection in her front, and it turns out to be Stonehenge.
Wow.
The metaphorical cliffhanger, so used as a literary device, is much, much older. So the Arabian 1001 Nights is in the story from the 8th century of Sherazade, and she tells a story every night to avoid being killed, and she always ends it so that the king wants to find out what happens next.
Isn't there one in the Bible?
What
when,
is the
like,
story in the
The
Bible?
cliffhanger with Mary, when she tells Joseph that he's not the father of the kid. And it like, dun, 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 dun. What?
Yes.
Yeah, he's not my son?
No.
No, dun, dun, dun,
Yeah.
dun. That's a cliffhanger, that, isn't it?
Yeah, but I like the dun. That's what I sing.
You're so right. It is better with
It
it.
is much better.
Previously in the Bible.
Phil, you mentioned cereals. What did you mean,
Cocoa
cereal?
Pops. What is it?
In newspapers and
OK,
so forth,
but it
and
also...
radio.
there were serial films in the early 20th century that would be shown once a week, usually on a Saturday morning, and then they would continue on from the last. And episodes tended to have some kind of suspenseful scene that would then resolve the following week. The most successful of these, probably 1914's The Perils of Pauline. That does have a literal cliffhanger in it in episode 6, with Pauline, the protagonist, clinging halfway down a cliff. But there's an effect called the Zeigarnik effect, and cliffhangers take advantage of this. People can remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks better than they can remember completed ones. So there was a psychologist working in 1927, Bluma Zeigarnik. She was the very first Russian woman ever to attend university, and she studied this phenomenon after her professor noticed that a waiter had better recollections of unpaid orders than paid ones. And she found that people will remember an interrupted task about 90% better than something that is uninterrupted. In a cliffhanger context, you remember the story better and you're more invested in it if the scene is left unresolved. Now, how did Britain's greatest national treasure get here?
Taxi.
What do you reckon? What's Britain's greatest national treasure?
Crown jewels.
It is to do with the crown jewels, the Cullinan diamond. World's largest diamond ever found.
Cool. Christ.
Like a molar.
Fox's mint.
It's about the size of an orange. So if you imagine the average diamond is about the size of a seed, and you compare that to the Cullinan diamond, it was absolutely massive. It was discovered in 1905 in the Cullinan mines in South Africa. Probably the most valuable object in the world at the time. Now, as you said, is in the crown jewels. And so, obviously, they want to get it to London.
But did they just someone have to pocket it?
Well, what they did was they wanted to make sure that it was safe, so they rather ceremoniously put it in a package and they locked it inside the safe of a steamboat, and there was a team of detectives and all those things making sure this huge thing was absolutely safe. In fact, that package was a decoy, and the diamond arrived in London safe and sound by registered post. Don't you love that? They just thought, oh, stick a stamp on it, be all right.
I'm very glad that you said that, because I just imagined the poor man walking all the way down the mall going... I've got a delivery for the Queen.
Well, it was taken immediately to King Edward VII to inspect. In fact, the diamond went unsold for 2 years, and the government of Transvaal, eventually, they bought it for the equivalent of £15 million today, and they wanted to give it as a gift to the king, but the government wasn't sure. But Churchill was the colonial secretary, and he said, absolutely, we need to take this. And because everybody was so grateful in Transvaal to him for doing this, Churchill was given a replica. He used to put it on a silver plate and show it off at dinners to guests.
I like the idea that you'd take it to the king and the king would inspect it, but, I mean, I'm presuming he doesn't know loads about diamond. I mean, what's he looking for?
I don't know.
I would have taken it to David Dickinson. He knows a bit more, doesn't he?
Well, that H.S. Samuel. Is that a good one?
Of course, you did have to find somebody who was good with diamonds, and the people who really knew about it was the Asher brothers in Amsterdam. And again, they made a big song and dance out of it. The Royal Navy took a box across the North Sea. In fact, Abraham Asher took the diamond, put it in his pocket and caught the train and went by train and ferry all the way.
Tickets, please.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
His brother, Joseph, studied the diamond and he planned the cut for weeks and weeks and weeks. 4 days before making the initial groove, he did a thing with the cutting knife and the knife broke rather than the diamond. I mean, it really was a massive thing. He spent 9 months cutting it into 9 major diamonds and 96 what they call brilliant.
What do you want it to say?
Yeah.
How do you spell it?
So Cullinan's 1, which is the Great Star of Africa, that is at the top of the sceptre, and Cullinan's 2 is in front of the imperial state crown. They're the major components That ruby there is Black Prince's ruby, the largest one in the world. Not cut properly, just given a bit of a polish. Now, on to the quest for true love. Who would be interested in this dating profile? Stocky build, short, bald, Bolivian male, moderate drinker, never been in a previous relationship, definitely wants children.
That's basically me.
Is it a human?
No, obviously it's not a human.
All Bolivian
Yes.
creature beginning with a Q.
It doesn't begin with a Q.
Well, it's in the wrong series.
It is. But we are on a quest to find this creature a mate. It is a frog.
A frog?
So this is a very sweet story, OK? This is a story of Romeo, a Census frog. So he has been living in a tank in Bolivia in the Cochabamba Natural History Museum, and it was thought that Romeo was the last one in his species. So the last one in his species is called an endling. And in 2018, his conservationist set up an online dating profile for him on Match.com in an effort to find him a mate. And here is the video that they made for their search.
Hi there, I'm Romeo, a Cuencas water frog from Bolivia. I'm a pretty simple guy. I tend to keep to myself and love spending nights at home. I also love eating. Then again, who doesn't?
Oh, who could resist, right? Who could resist?
They're good friends to do that.
Didn't want to do it himself.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
To do it yourself.
They're good mates.
Get your
They're
friends
good
to
mates.
do it.
Miguel, could you do a video for me?
Hey, why don't I put it you get catchy the worm? Come out under the rock. You get the worm.
I have the tiny arms of the frog. It is not possible for me to hold the phone and eat the worm.
Say what you want me to say.
Write it down on a big piece of paper, hold it behind the phone.
The thing is, it worked.
Loads of frogs started turning up.
Put toad in a frog bra.
Hello.
They went out on a frog-finding expedition. They found 3 males and 2 females, and he has now been paired with a female who they have obviously named... Juliet, exactly right.
See, because I am called Romeo. This photograph was taken of me at my modern jazz dance class. When you dance in Bolivia, you must never smile.
You're completely wrong about Romeo's personality, because they put him with Juliet. And she's really energetic. She loves to swim, she eats a lot, she keeps trying to escape. And
she is driving me on the wall. She's climbing out of the tank.
Yeah. He's very...
eating my worms.
He's very shy.
He doesn't like her. There's no such thing as shyness. That's an affectation.
Oh.
He doesn't like her and he's acting as if he's shy. I want a different one. This isn't the one.
There are other animal dating apps. There is a dating app called Tudder. Does anybody know what that might be?
For cows?
It is for cows.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. It was launched in early 2019, and you can browse cattle from all over the UK to find a suitable mate for your livestock. You can request either cows or bulls, and you do literally swipe left or right.
Find someone that looks at you the way that Frisia is looking at me, honestly.
You know, apparently Andy Murray has invested in Tudder. I don't know why. You thought that...
That's not true, is it?
Yeah, that is a true thing, yes.
Why?
I don't know the workings of his mind.
I don't know if you're aware, but I recently had an artificial hip put in. So I need to find new avenues of revenue. And I thought cow dating. I was on a lot of painkillers.
You don't sound anything like him at all.
Yeah, but I sound a lot like the Bolivian.
It was like the frog was in the room. But I don't know who this bloke is.
I'm Andy Murray. I won Wimbledon.
He certainly physically resembled him.
How are the cows swiping left or right with the
I think they get the farmers to do Speaking of breeding, who has the world's most sinister genitals?
In attendance or in the world?
world, the most sinister...
Sinister as in to the left.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, how we play.
Oh, is that what that means?
It's Latin for left. So, in 2017, there was a snail called Jeremy who was really lonely. And
Jezza!
Yeah, so...
Where's he from? I'll do the accent.
Jeremy was from southwest London.
What?
This is an extremely rare sinistral snail. So that means that the shell spirals to the left. So he was called Jeremy because they named him after Jeremy Corbyn. But it meant his genitals were on the wrong side. So he could only have sex with another snail who also had genitals on the left side. Anyway, they did a search and they found 2 potential mates. This is a lovely story.
You keep saying it's a lovely story. A succession of perverts trying to get weird animals to have sex. This isn't a lovely story at all.
Wait.
I want to see the snails.
I've never seen a Celeste one.
With his old fella on the left-hand side. Snail porn, come on. It takes ages, it takes ages.
Anyway, this is a nice story because 2 potential mates were found. One in Spain and one in Suffolk. And they brought the 3 together.
Oh, now it's a threesome.
No! No! It's worse, darling. The ones from Spain and Suffolk got down to it and Jeremy had to watch.
Was he videoing it? This is the key.
Yeah. You say he had to watch, he could have just gone indoors.
Yeah.
Now, because I love you, Phil, we do actually have some snail porn.
Oh, yeah.
This is snails engaging in foreplay. So what they do is they circle and they touch each other's tentacles. Yeah. And if you look carefully there, you can see their penises come out of their heads. That is just a thing. It's a snail thing.
Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Don't worry about unblocking the sink. Come to bed.
Now, only one final challenge remains for our gallant knights as we trepidate into the treacherous kingdom of general ignorance. Fingers on buzzers, please. Which is the closest planet to Earth?
Mars?
Not Mars. Anybody else?
Venus?
Oh,
The moon?
no, just... generally.
Mercury.
Yes, absolutely right. It is Mercury. But it's not how we normally think of it. So the minimum distance between the Earth and Venus is 24 million miles. If you have a look at this, this is how we generally think
very near, isn't it?
of it. Yeah, well, it is in sort of space terms. The minimum distance to Mars is 34 million miles, and to Mercury, it's 48 million miles. So you would imagine that it all goes like that and everybody stays in the same lineup. However, that is not how orbits work. So let's have a look at this video, which explains it a little bit more. Initially, it looks as though Mercury is the furthest away, but the way the orbits function is that Venus often is right the other side of the sun, making it really, really far away. And there's a guy called Oliver Hawkins, and he wrote some computer code to try and work this out. And he found that the planet that spends most of the time closer to Earth than any other is Mercury. So it's closest to Earth 46% of the time. Venus was closest 36% of the time, and Mars only 18%.
I think I did say all of that.
Yeah. Venus is an astonishing place because a day on Venus is longer than a year. It rotates so slowly that you could stroll across its surface at exactly the same speed as the sun passes through the sky. It means you could watch the sunset forever just by walking.
But you'd be eviscerated.
You would, darling. It rains sulfuric acid and the atmosphere is 872 degrees Fahrenheit.
But anything for a sunset, am I right?
Yeah. Anybody have a mnemonic to remember the planets in order?
Yes. It's Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune.
Thank you, darling. That's perfect. That is the order, and...
Pluto doesn't count. It's actually a Disney character.
Yes, that's right. That is the order of the planets, and one is often taught it at school. So many volcanoes emit mulberry jam sandwiches under normal pressure, or my very easy method just speeds up naming planets. So there were...
I couldn't get past vagina, though. I've got moist vagina expected, might just steam up 90.
So weirdly, that's probably the one I'm going to remember. Anybody else? Alice, you've got one?
Mine's quite depressing.
OK.
Mum's vacant expression means Jane sulks unless noticed.
Wow, you were a jolly girl at school. My favourite is Mary's virgin explanation made Joseph suspect upstairs neighbour. Worth pointing out, of course, that Pluto is no longer regarded as a planet.
No, not there.
It's now a dwarf. But on the subject of Earth, where would you find the oldest part of it?
Antique shop.
Alice is sort of heading in the right direction in terms of it being on display somewhere.
Is it a fossil in a museum? Is it something like that?
Well, it's actually in Houston.
Oh, it's the moon rock. Moon rock?
It is, darling. It is absolutely a piece of moon rock.
Because it was...
Don't blind me with science. What's that?
So we're talking about Apollo 14, so 1971. They brought some bits and pieces back, and they haven't really had time to analyse them all. You know how you have stuff in a box and you think, oh, I must get to it. So it's at NASA's Lunar Sample Laboratory facility in Houston, and in January 2019, they analysed a piece of this rock, and they realised it came from what's known as the Hadean Earth. So we are talking about the planet only being about 500 million years old at that point. And it was found on the moon, but almost certainly what happened is this particular specimen was blasted off the Earth about 4 billion years ago when a large asteroid struck. So it would have shot through what would have been much thinner atmosphere and collided with the moon, which at that time was only a third of its current distance. As I'm sure you know, the moon is drifting away from the Earth annually about 1.6 inches. It used to be much closer than it is. So that is an astonishing thing that they found it in a cupboard. It's only tiny. It's a chip, just about a couple of centimetres squared.
Everyone's got that drawer with, you know,
yes,
elastic bands,
yep,
like a USB stick, yeah, all that.
Some floppy disks.
We cleared out our understairs cupboard and we found 3 fondue sets. What is...
I've never been less surprised by anything before.
The oldest known piece of Earth was found on the moon. What is the name of this sword?
Excalibur.
It isn't.
Yeah.
Not
right.
That's the first one he got. Excalibur's the one later.
Yes.
From the Lady of the Lake. The one he pulled out the
yes.
stone is called Terry.
Oh.
Yeah, you're right.
Terry the sword.
The sword and stone is likely called Clarent.
Clarent.
Clarent, and it's a sword of peace.
He pulled it out of the stone shortly before buying his first pair of trousers.
They're quite a fit, aren't they?
That's what they're all laughing at.
I did see a boy in the street the other day wearing jeggings. A boy.
It's a mistake, isn't it?
I know, you can see everything. Could you see he was sinister? I know a snail like it.
And we end with the quest for eternal life. So, Sir Alan of Carr, your final challenge.
OK.
Upon yonder table lies the chalice of eternal life. Prithee, select the one true holy grail and bring it to me.
Oh, OK.
Yeah, good luck.
Is this my hat?
Oh, yes, of course.
If I meant to look like Indiana Jones, I look like a Charlie Hungerford from Bergerac. Do you remember him? Right, what am I doing?
Right, so you are looking for the Holy Grail. Which one are you going to select?
What's that Indiana Jones one where he thinks that Jesus' cup will be like the golden one, but it's the modest one, isn't it?
OK. So what do you reckon?
Well, I think it's the wooden one.
Here's the thing. You should have picked the tray. The tray is the Holy Grail. A grail was most likely a serving dish, so would you please bring me the tray? And none of the cups whatsoever.
Has it got one of those beanbag padded bottoms?
Oh, I love those.
If I could have that, please, darling. The word
What,
grail...
like...
Thank you, sweetheart. It comes from the Latin gradale, grail, and it means a deep platter that you would serve food on during medieval banquets. It gradually evolved from the sort of Middle Ages onwards into people thinking it was a larger vessel with an elaborate cover and then a drinking cup. Traditionally, the idea is it gives immortality to the drinker, although the Bible gives no special significance to the chalice that Jesus uses to consecrate his blood wine. It became very popular in Arthurian tales. One of these stories tells of Joseph of Arimathea bringing it to Glastonbury, actually, where he
got smashed! Oh, my God.
Well, there's a stream that runs red. Is that right?
Oh, by the Red Bull stand.
Well, the legend has it, it's because it's travelled through Christ's blood via the Holy Grail. I think spoil sports scientists will tell you it's the high levels of iron red oxide in the soil. Well, I'm afraid you picked wrong, but you look very fetching in the hat. I would love to see a camp Indiana Jones. Something terrible happens, he goes, whoa! A grail actually looks like this, which means a holy grail looks like this.
Oh.
I'm working my arse off here, people. Which brings us to the scores. In first place, with -1, it's Phil. In second place, with -7, making a fantastic debut, it's Alan Carr. In third place, a surprising -15, Alan. And in last place, with -18, it's Alice. So, farewell from my noble knights, Alice, Alan, Phil, and Alan and me. Till we meet again, let us dwell upon this questing quotation from the late, great Knight of the Realm, Sir Terry Pratchett. So much universe and so little time. Good night.